edition of VC I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we are going to be talking about everything around data today. Data, and more specifically around machine learning. What do we do with data when we get it? What makes it valuable? What makes it actionable? That's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And we've brought some of the best and brightest from around the world to share their insights, not only on what is happening with these opportunities, but also where are the gaps? Where are things needed in terms of investment and building for this area to really thrive? And what does the future look like as we start to see more data? And how will that impact the industries that we all know and love? And we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, make sure you click that subscribe button. If you're an investor that would like to be on VC, do reach out to the team and or myself. We'd love to have you to share your thoughts and insights on technologies, industries, and regions around the world. And if you're an entrepreneur and you'd like to be on our virtual stage, do reach out as well. We'd love to find the right stage for you to share your business, company, and or service product as well with us as investors focused on your area to share feedback, but also begin building a foundational relationship with us and our live audience. And a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and Emmanuel for making VC possible every single day. With that being said, let's go and get started. Alpesh, to you, first intro and background for everybody today.
Hi, I'm Alpesh Joshi. I'm a tech entrepreneur and investor. I've been in data for too long, 15 years plus. And I wrote my first neural network, which is now called deep learning, back in 1991. So showing my age at university. I'm working on building, working on helping companies enable data and AI across their business, because one of the problems is actually to build this kind of stuff is complex. Even if you have AWS and Azure and IBM Cloud and GCP, Google Cloud Platform, they give you the components to actually build and deliver that kind of stuff is pretty complex. And we want to make it easier for companies to do that.
Well, and it needs to get easier as well. And we're going to get into that today because there is so much that is talked about in these industries, and there is so much impact that data can have again, but you've got to be able to use it somehow, and you've got to be able to make sense of it, and being able to just have it isn't been valuable anymore. So with that being said, Jose, to you, a quick intro and background. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kyle. Good evening. Thank you for having me today here again. My name is Jose Grasa. I have been a serial entrepreneur now for more or less than 40 years in different verticals, essentially in brand building and also in the consumer industry. And later on, for the last 20 years, I've been active in the financial and technology area, specifically for solutions for small, medium companies and micro businesses. I've been a business angel now for 26 years, and I've been a VC for more or less like 3, and an advisor for government as well in the past, as today still for some venture capitalists. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'm really enthusiastic to be on this show today. Thank you, Kyle.
Wonderful. Welcome back. Glad to have you as well. Marcus, last but not least, a little intro, a little background. Welcome back.
Yeah, and I'm very jealous of your factory. You've got everything going on over there. So yeah, thank you all for having me. It's great to be here. So very, very brief background on me. I'm the hobbyist here in terms of different types of industries. I'm very fortunate to have founded 2 companies in content rights management back in the day before streaming services, and then worked in fintech for a while being 9 years. And then after that, I've shifted my own focus to data. But having been fortunate along the way, I've got the chance to invest in some really, really cool initiatives, such as in software robotics. So for example, open source RPA, in democratized machine learning, in for example, deep NLP, and in different things that relate around data. For example, one of the companies that I'm working with is called Morphle, and they help e-commerce sites optimize based on who actually lands on the site. So, part of my benefit is that I get to draw from people that are far smarter than I am. What I do now in my operational role is I run a company called Perfina, And at Perfina, we're creating a snowflake for personal data. So allowing individuals to import all of the stuff about them that all of the internet giants have into one cloud, then the data rails on top of that. And then we work with a community of about 20,000 software developers to essentially figure out how you mash all this together and what excites users and so on and so forth.
Wow. So let's dive right in. What drove you to be a part of this company and to create this? I mean, that's a huge undertaking. Mostly because you're focusing on the personal side of data versus the private side or the enterprise side. What led you towards that direction?
Well, if you kind of look at where we are today, then we're kind of in this funny situation where on one side, we're generating more and more data all the time, 5G, 6G, IoT, all of this. And then at the same time, this data is becoming increasingly a problem. And I say this having seen this report from Gartner, I believe, on and off again, that every single data request, so when an individual says to a company that, hey, you got my data and under GDPR or CCPA or whatever, I want it back, that costs the company $1,400 to process. And I actually believe that that's going to be a undershooting or underestimation of that. And California is expected to have 80 million of these requests. So do the quick math, 80 million times 1,400. So you kind of have this very, very odd mesh of a situation where you have on one side a few companies that dominate the data. If you are a software developer, everybody knows that you need data to create the best apps. But then you have two problems that unless you're one of these 4 internet giants or then the CIA, I mean, you're practically screwed. You don't have any of this data. So do you want your users to fill out countless forms and gather this data, or do you partner? So you kind of have this problem that, there's a cold start problem for developers. But when we looked at this environment, especially after my second company and my transition from there, we kind of just saw this space that something is bound to happen there. Like there is no feasible scenario that in 10 years data looks the way that it does right now for a number of reasons. Like the entire environment is one, the fact that developers are expected to write personal apps without any data that's locked away. And then maybe the third being that, once we have all of this data, the current technical architecture just doesn't hold unless this data and then the actual applications are close to one another or in the same space. So that's kind of the problem setting. But again, I'm kind of humbled by the fact that I've always got some brilliant people around me. So this is also something where obviously it's not my show, but it's a group of people in our team, in our community, and in this extended nearly 20,000 software developers, that this isn't a problem that one company will solve by any means. Like we were talking with Alpesh earlier about kind of this problem around the application layer. So think of, for example, how many things could you build on data? Like, for example, I talked with an entrepreneur yesterday that has a glucose monitoring device, like some new startup that created a new pad that analyzes your glucose level continuously. And then we're talking that would be super cool to be able to combine with, for example, sleep data. So that's one application. There's millions of them, and there's no way that one company can create this. So the thing that I'm really excited about in the data part is, can you actually turn this entire market and kind of flip it on its head? Give individuals the tools to bring their data where they want it to be. So for example, if I want to get glucose monitoring, then I can bring my data with me, sort of like bring your own beer, but bring your own data. And then on the other side, it's also a super cool idea that, what if data was just free flowing in the future? That if you just wanted to write an app on top of it, you could just get your individual customer to port it to you and then essentially create different types of applications. Now, this is, like you said, this is not a small thing. This is like a gargantuan environment shift. And there's bound to be lots of different color in terms of how this plays out. But at the same time, if you just look at the environment, one of the things that I'm 100% convinced about is that, this is the place to be, that there's so much that will happen. And there's going to be so many different opportunities for us to actually go out there and open up this market, because right now it's just, it's not really a free market. And I think that that's something that will change.
Well, and you're calling it out perfectly on the personal side. On the enterprise side, there's still a ton of areas of opportunity, as we've spoken about, and I see Jose shaking his head, and we're going to come to that in just a moment. But on the personal side, we have all this data that we generate, right? User generated data or content. And we have yet to understand how to use it as individuals, but companies have. Now there's a blending world that may be sitting in the middle there of how can we both figure out how to use this data for our benefits and also build actionable insights into that. But before I go on, you have a comment, so go ahead, and then I'll turn it over to Elpish.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that it's not just the data, because I think data is something that yes, enterprises have a bunch of data, and we don't yet have a grasp of our data. But let's be fair, most consumers don't really care about data. Like we're data geeks, so we like data, but most consumers they couldn't care less. But I think one of the things that's also super cool is that can you also take some of these other enterprise tools that exist out there and turn them around as well? Like, for example, we talked a little bit about AI and ML, and these are things that sit on top of data. But could you, for example, turn these around as well and then have the user with their data, and let's say their predictions for where their, glucose levels will go if they do something. So this is just a general kind of more of a personal hat type of thing that I really like, this angle of turning things around and democratizing them. Now, it's very, very important that you're always focused on the solution layer, because that glucose monitoring, that's the solution, that's the app. You shouldn't have to care about all these other things, like incidental things like ML or data, to actually get there.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point as I turn it over to Alpesh to hear the same, his thoughts. But as users, we're not sure what to do with that data yet that we do generate. And if we do know, do we care? And how do we care, or what do we care about, I think is something we're still all trying to understand as individuals. And that will be different for everybody, which will be an exciting area to see how that develops. And Alpesh, I want to come to you. You dated yourself, but I won't. You've been in this industry for a few years. Building models. What are you seeing as the current state of machine learning and data as we know it today through your experience to where we're going? Oh, my friend, you are on mute, but all great points thus far.
So I mean, to be honest, we're in the early days of application of machine learning and deep learning and all those things. The reality is there's huge amounts of hype and press, but the reality of implementation is far, far from that. Because frankly, if you talk about enterprise, Marcus is talking about personal data, but you talk about enterprise, most traditional businesses haven't figured out where the data is. They don't know where it is, and they don't know what it is. I mean, it's if you're going to do AI or machine learning or deep learning, whatever, you have to organize your data and have it available to use it. So that's one big problem. There's a statistic that somebody, I can't remember where I read it, but somebody was saying 90% of all machine learning AI models that get built don't deploy to live. They're not implemented in a live environment. So we're a long way away. I think not long way away, but we're away in terms of how do you build a core infrastructure to handle your data? How do you bring it together? How do you then implement use cases around the use of data in your business? That is still pretty early in most organizations, I think. Look, the digitally native businesses, and we know all of them, the Facebooks, the Gaffers, they are, you can see when you get it right, what the effect of that is on your business, right? And the digitally native companies who have started, frankly, I know some of them actually haven't used data. It's really weird. I mean, I talk to startups and early stage companies regularly, and I ask the question, okay, what's your data strategy? I'm going to use data across the whole of business. And they go, what do you mean? And so, well, if you're building a new startup, you need to have a data layer from scratch. That's what you should focus on, because you can't run your business without data. And no one, I can tell you, I was on TechCrunch Disrupt about a month ago, and I talked to 50, 60, 70 people. Not one of these people had figured that out. So part of the challenge is here, even early stage companies don't really understand how data can transform their business, and how if they embed that into their end-to-end business, it's how transformation it can be, how you can scale it faster. So I'm excited by it. I mean, because I think that there's a long way to go, but the thing for me is accelerating that. And the challenge is, how do you accelerate the development of those things? How do you accelerate focusing on use cases like Marcus is talking about? I think the focus should be on accelerating use cases to get them implemented and not have to worry about all the other stuff. And interestingly, Andreessen Horowitz, a16z.com, if you look, published a blog entry last weekend on Sunday, talking about the emerging modern data infrastructures. You know, they see the opportunity. They're seeing the gaps where you have to build that infrastructure, and somebody needs to build it and provide it. And to be honest, there aren't that many. You know, people think, well, I just go to AWS and I'll use it. Well, you know, you have to build this stuff. So I think, you know, there are a load of startups emerging, but we're still pretty early in terms of getting that to happen. One of the big things which I'd like to mention is cloud. You know, one of the biggest things is that most large enterprises, even medium enterprises, have their own data centers. The reality is they're not going to be able to pull the data together, use the data to scale as they scale up the acquisition of data in their own data centers. They're going to have to move to the cloud. And there are also new technologies coming through which are designed, built from the cloud. Snowflake is one of them. We use Snowflake as part of our architecture, where they're cloud native serverless databases. So you can dump Oracle, you can dump, you know, Redshift, you can dump all these things which are not designed for the cloud. So there's a number of pieces that are starting to emerge to make it easier to do this.
Well, on the first half, you're absolutely right. You have to put in the effort to, first off, people don't know what to do with that data yet, as you mentioned. Businesses are still trying to figure that out. And we've been promised the idea of actionable insights around wearables and connected devices for years now, and we still are yet to see it. And if anything, are seeing the very early days of that. And people are still trying to figure that out from a business standpoint. But what you mentioned around the effort is, you're right, you have to build this. It's not just click, click, boom, and you all of a sudden have those training models built. They are training models for a reason. They are things that have to be taught, have to be learned, and have to continue to be built over time as well. So you have to put in the work. And with the A16 article, I have read the same thing. It's great, and I'll share it in the show notes as well. It's an outstanding article. They did a great job at explaining that infrastructure as well. And then your last point around serverless, this is where Edge comes in so uniquely, is that we're looking at a world where more and more devices will be connected, more of us will be connected than ever before. And because of that, there will be more data out there. But how do you process that? How do you actually do something with it is still to be determined. And bringing up serverless is a great point, because you don't always need the cloud. And the cloud is not built in most cases for exactly what you mentioned and this new world that we're heading into. So absolutely outstanding points, Elpish. We'll come back to that in just a second. Jose, to you, current state, what are you seeing around these areas from your world as well?
I probably have a different perspective also because I'm a finance guy and not really a technician or an engineer. Although I've been leading tech teams for now more or less like 30 years. Some teams quite big, as 100 men. The way I look at this basically like this. Look, somebody who comes from finance, what he does the whole day is handling data. That's all we do, nothing else. So we are used to put that data, essentially, number data, into corners, blocks, ledgers, whatever it is. So the way you treat it obviously needs a specific structure. But what I would like to pinpoint out here is that I don't think that everybody has the notion that data is the new oil. Because with data, right, although it's, if you look at it, you say, look, it's static, you can't do much with it. But what I can tell you is that it can give you huge amounts of strategic information that makes the difference between a good decision and a bad decision. And if you don't have that data, there's no way you can surpass, doing that. And look, for example, at statistics, right? It's not by accident that a lot of people are always running with statistics, converging their data and see what the outcome is to make their decisions. So that's where I see it. Specifically, I've been investing and looking into a very interesting area, which is a huge amount of data, which is what I call business inclusion, okay? And what we do there is we converge different technologies that treat a huge amount of data, like banking, social economy, marketplace, business management, right? And we converge that all into one product, which we have been given the name as BizMoney. And essentially what we are creating here is, it may sound a little bit strange, but we gave it a name, and we are creating this, what we call a social market economy. So we are creating a whole economy, right? And this is only possible based on the amount of data that we collect from these different verticals that we then converge and we can analyze. And essentially what comes out of that is two things. Speed on one hand, okay? And then we give that speed back to the user, which is typically in our case, a micro business owner or a small company. And definitely they are very far behind on everything. They have no notion what's going on. They also don't have the budgets to invest in all these things. And that speed makes it that they don't need to do a lot of execution and become a decision maker. So this data that then has been basically treated by AI and develops itself more or less on top of, let's say, some machine learning, as long as the experience goes with all these individuals, eventually is given back to them and saying, you know what, based on all this data, including yourself, this is the outcome. And now you can decide if you want to go with this or still want to go with a decision that you personally want to take, as if you would not know any of this data, okay? And that is a huge amount of benefit for them. Also, I can tell you, because we basically tested it out, this on an operational cost basis can reduce their operational cost as high as 50 to 70%. Now, that's something interesting, right? Because at the end, you know, their profitability can only be seen based on the free cash flows. So if you have less cost, that means that you're going to free more cash flows, you're more profitable, you can finance your business. So basically that's where we want to go to, okay? Now, I would like to say something in a different sector, which will touch all what we have been discussing tonight. One is that we are not so far from quantum computing. Once that quantum computing is available, the amount of data we can process in the time frame, nothing compares to what we're doing today. It's a huge difference. You can look at your smartphone and I can guarantee you that in your smartphone you have more computer power than, you know, probably the biggest computer today available, right? Now, that's something that nobody can imagine, okay? And if the bandwidth goes with it, then there is almost no limit on what we're going to see in the world and on real-time executional and interaction, right? Yeah. Another thing is that I strongly believe, because of quantum computing and how technology has developed, I can tell you that, for example, personally, every 3 years, we reanalyze our technology. In some cases, we just put it aside because it makes no sense to continue with a technology which is like 5 years old. It's so behind that if you are trying to make it correct, right, the time that you lose, better start from scratch again, develop it, and you have it in the latest technology. Now, this brings me to the latest trends, which is ongoing since 2010. And that will be a real maker. I'm really enthusiastic about this, which is called low-code development based on AI, okay? But also, let's call it about people's development. The issue is that we somehow, in a very fast pace, need to go to something which is called people's development. Why? Because the guys who design the processes, right, who have, let's say, the feeling for marketing and those user interfaces are not the guys who are programming. That's the issue. So if we can converge both programmers, okay, into the same platform, right, and also these developers, and we can speed it up, then you really have something exciting. There are some solutions on the market. We recently did a benchmark, okay? It's still quite expensive, but what will happen in the next 5 years for sure is that a lot of people that nowadays are not programming and they don't want to program will be able to dig into those processes and build up by drag and drop a lot of stuff that eventually a programmer picks up, right? I call it a senior developer, and does the final twiddling touch to it. Okay.
Right.
Okay. One thing that.
So Jose, real quick. Sorry, I want to pause because I want to make sure
Okay.
we get a few more pieces in here. But you're bringing up a great point around low code, no code, and the shift in program development, and that touches a little bit on Alpesh's point previously. And I see him shaking his head. Alpesh, anything to add into that area and how that's an opportunity emerging? And then Marcus will be coming to you in just a moment.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
Jose, I know you got more. Just hold that for 1 minute.
No,
Okay.
it goes back to what I said earlier about making it easy to leverage data. One of my colleagues has built a low code, no code data flow tool, right? The idea is, at the moment you have to do hand cranking of any of the data to put it together, to figure out the quality of it, to expose an API, to plug it into things. There's a lot of work to do. I mean, it's most companies have, there's a lot of work to get there, and it's a lot of effort, and you build it all bespoke. You have to build this stuff yourself. Really can't just, you can't find, there aren't that many tools out there that allow you to do it. So I think low code is absolutely an important one as well. I mean, it's, so for, the challenge is that we're talking about little silos of tech. For me, it's really about how do you get a use case? So what's the basic thing you want to do? You want to find the data, organize the data, make sure the quality of the data is there, expose it and do things with it. Either build an app, right, or analyze it, or do machine learning on it to improve processes, improve the business. At the moment, all of that is fragmented. To do that is a lot of work. The guys that master it, which are the big ones I mentioned earlier, they're just away. And at the moment, it's a lot of work to get that to happen. That whole process. So you mentioned, Kyle, you read that paper from A16Z. You can see the core infrastructure and the different use cases they describe, which are around machine learning or data infrastructure, whatever else. We're seeing companies who are providing some of those open source components, but frankly, they're just bits of software. You have to take those things and merge them together. You have to build solutions around it. And the sort of thing, three things that for any small and medium sized, but even large companies, they don't have the money, they don't have the time, they don't have the skills in house to do it. So therefore, they start building point solutions in silos. So that's what you get. So if you can make it easier to orchestrate, manage, deliver tools that can focus on the use case, rather than getting, for example, data scientists spend 70% of the time trying to fix the data, they can fix the sort of focus on solving the business problem. We'd get way ahead a lot faster. And it's a complex problem, and this is not a simple problem to solve. I'm not trying to trivialize it. It is a complex problem to solve, but we're getting there. We're defining it. We're getting there. But there's lots of new tools and technologies emerging. Low code is one whole lump of stuff that's emerging. So it's exciting times. I think it will, over time, in the next 3 to 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it'll easier and easier to do this.
Well, and it's been rapidly progressing, right? I mean, we've been talking about artificial intelligence here on VCTV for a while, but also in terms of its entrance in the market. I mean, it's been here for decades. And we're finally now being able to catch up with the technology, with data, with where these future applications can go to make this all possible. And if you look back to reference the article you mentioned around A16Z, so Andreessen Horowitz, there are 3 common blueprint points: modern business intelligence, multimodal data processing, and then AI, so artificial intelligence and ML. And that the first 2 are analytical systems, and then the second and third, so the multimodal data processing and AI and ML, those are part of the operation. And if you go into further the article, and again, we'll share that, and I shared it with all 3 of you, that's a simple version. The complexity of each of those pieces is so vast. And just looking at this, I mean, again, modern business intelligence, to Marcus and to Jose's point, we're still in the early days of that. Still in the early days of businesses starting to understand how to leverage data and intelligence to optimize their business processes, whether that's supply chains, that's just general business to business operations, whatever it may be, products and services and the like. Multimodal data processing, what do you do with this data? Marcus, you touched on this. Where does that data get processed? How do we handle this? Elpish, you've spent a few years working in this. And then AI and ML, we're just now getting to those possibilities for everybody to begin to see this. And it's so exciting to see. And Elpish, I didn't want to take away from you. I just wanted to explain to the audience a little bit more on that article, but you're bringing up exactly great points. And this is what you do as well. And before I go to Marcus, for you, I mean, you've spent, again, a few years in this. If a business is getting into this for the first time, what would you want them to know if you were working with them or you were out there talking to them of saying, hey, this is what you need to know to begin your first steps into this area, working with data and artificial intelligence? What were those things, or what are those things you would tell them? Elpish, that was to you. I apologize. What would you tell? Yeah, no, it's okay. So what would you tell a business if they're looking to get into this area for the first time? They're starting to work with data. They're starting to work with models. What would you tell them if you're looking to work with them?
No, I'm an architect by background, right? And I'd be actually organizing yourself, build an architecture, figure out what a data-driven architecture should be in the business, build an operating model around your business that puts data at the heart of what you're trying to do. That's the first thing to do. Organize yourself first. And at the same time, start experimenting and building a sort of data pipeline. So this is also about how do you shift the business model and the operating model of a company so that you can build solutions fast. So rather than spending 6 months building a data platform and doing that, you're building outcomes really quite fast. And so again, using the build, measure, learn cycle from Reese and the sort of subsequent levels of that, you put the operating model in place where you're not going to spend a year trying to build a data platform. You're going to spend time identifying use cases, building out some core architecture, delivering those use cases, and effectively building that into an operating model so you can innovate and deliver quickly. And that's hard for most enterprises. I mean, it's pretty hard, and it's pretty scary, to be honest. It's scary. Whenever I go into any organization, these are the things that I talk about. I say, guys, you need to shift your operating model on how you actually deliver value to make it faster. And they go, whoa, what do you mean? It's like they'd be scared,
And your mindset. I mean, this is a complete mind shift. And Marcus, this is
culture, but culture is
a big whole different ball game.
Oh, it's a big problem. Culture is a big problem.
Yeah,
the ownership, the politics around data. So people go, it's my data. Why do you want it? I think Marcus mentioned the company he runs. Personal data thing and customer data. I tell you what, every single company in every single silo, and Jose will know this from banks. Each division owns customer data, and they say, well, why do you want it? You go and ask, can I have the data? Go, well, why do you want it? It's my customer data. What do you want it for? And you're like, no, guys, and there was a bank, just to give you a real example, I was talking, there's a really, really large bank, I won't give the name, but the lady who runs customer data strategy said to me, I think we have between 35 million and 55 million customers, but we don't know how many. And because they don't know their customers and they don't know stuff about the customers, they've been fined billions of dollars.
I'll give you another example, and I won't name the bank, but let's just call them out as one of the biggest British banks in the world, operating predominantly in Asia, but I won't name them. I remember sitting with one of their heads, and they said that they have 160 years of customer data. And, I just point blank looked at them and said that, do you actually think that's a good thing? Because part of the problem is that, like to Alpish's point, if you're not organized, you haven't got the value out of the data, I mean, it's gone. It's not worth anything. It's a liability. And then the other thing, like I spent 10 years in fintech, and I think one of the things about banks, culture and regulation do not mix. So, I mean, you take all of these different things about like, a user asks about their data. I said that it costs $1,400 to process. you could times that by 10 for a bank, because for a bank, it's sometimes interpreted by the local regulation that it's not just basically the data that comes from the online service, it's from the lifetime of the customer relationship. And that means printed paper most of the time. So when we're talking about data, then I mean, there's some poor person at the bank whose job it is to photocopy those pieces of paper and send them to the customer, or then, send them via mail. So as far as nightmare goes, I mean, that's one level of nightmare that I do not want to touch. But then we have this nightmare that we're creating for the future, where we still have a choice. Like all the data that we log, how miraculously hopeless do we want the future to be? Because, I mean, to everybody's point, we'll have more and more data all the time. One of the things that I want to just kind of pick up on that you guys talked about is kind of these no-code, low-code platforms, and kind of this democratization of technology. Let's call it like big enterprise technology and democratization within the enterprise. So we're not talking anything revolutionary, we're talking very, very small scale. But for example, if you have a bank and the bank has invested heavily into an AI ML platform, you're absolutely sure that they're running their core processes through that. So if you are a line manager in a wealth division dealing with private clients, I mean, you're not going to get to play with that fancy engine because your problem's not significant enough. If you're dealing with, for example, real estate portfolios and you've got some edge cases that you'd like to do some analysis on, I mean, you're not going to get touch their IBM Watson setup and all of this. So I think that's one of the areas that's super interesting, and it's something that's starting to gain traction. So for example, I have an investment in a company called EasyML, and they've created this basically democratized ML platform where anybody can go and they can train a model, supervisory machine learning, and then they can predict on certain data. It has a very, very snazzy UI. It walks you through everything. It doesn't require any background information about that. And I think and then it has a developer layer, which is kind of much more my own expertise. But I think one of the cool things about these types of technologies, and using EasyML as an example, is that if you take it to a huge bank, like, you might not actually replace their, multi-million dollar a year AI setup, because I mean, you're not going to get time with that. But you might give all of the line managers, all of the P&L responsibles kind of in the enterprise, you might actually say that, hey, you guys, here's a platform. Why don't you run your data on this? And I think that's something that if we think about quantum computing and 5G and 6G and all these different things, and I mean, there's a huge timeline question that when can we actually use these? But if we think about no code, low code, it's today. Like, you have this problem in enterprise that if I am a very, very successful P&L manager at, for example, Goldman Sachs, my problem is not big enough to get compute time in the big boys division. But at the same time, if I were to have those resources, I could make a bunch more money. So it's a very, very practical enterprise problem. And I think that's kind of the area where it's actually, funnily enough, it's actually an area that doesn't interest me personally that much. I'm much more kind of in the huge scenario, but I think that's kind of in my portfolio. Like, for example, I see that there's these developer plays and these enterprise plays. And I see that the developer plays, they're much more like the 5-10 year horizons, and the enterprise plays, they're today, because you already have these problems. So I think it's just kind of where we tackle. And I think the more practical we are about like how we actually apply these in the solutions, how we kind of spread the technology, and how we, almost like level the playing field, even if we're talking about staff within the same bank. I think all of those makes more intelligent organizations, and that means better services.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, we are at time here and at the lightning round. So I do want to come around for everyone's super quick closing thoughts and where everyone can be found. So Marcus, you are the last to finish. You've got your closing thoughts out. Where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
Sure. So you can go to profina.com. You can find relevant stuff about what we're building, and then would love to hear any reactions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jose. Quick closing thoughts, super quick, and then where can everyone find you online?
Yes, you can find me essentially on LinkedIn, on the Jose Grasa, or you can also go to BizMoney and put it there, and then you can find me also. Um, my thoughts basically is the following. This is the last message I would like to say. With big data, right, we can know more about any individual than he knows about himself. That's the issue. If you converge it all, right, you can bring him data that he doesn't even imagine that that's about him. And that's the perspective for the next 5 years. And I would like to leave it like that and have everybody thinking about it. Thank you, Kyle.
I love that. Good job, Jose. Good job. Elpish, close us out. Quick closing thoughts. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, we've talked about it. In summary, the AI is overhyped, to be honest. I don't know whether in the trough, as Gartner calls it, the trough of disillusionment around AI or not, but I think the realism around what data can actually do and how these kind of clever technologies can help change a business, we're seeing it happen, but it's frictionful. God, it's not a real word. There's lots of friction. There's not a real word. Lots of friction. There's no friction full. It's a bloody American word anyway. No. But full of friction. There you go. But I'm excited by it because my view is that if you can simplify all of that stuff, then it will accelerate the adoption of this across organizations. What I said at the beginning around every company should start thinking about a data layer. I didn't say data lake. I said data layer, a logical data layer that brings data together, and that's a big one. People still sell data lakes. That's not the solution. A data layer. There we go. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Alpesh Doshi. On Twitter, I'm at Alpesh Doshi. And yeah, thank you very much, Carl. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. And a big thank you as well to our audience for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Do reach out if you'd like to be on a show like today, like our investors, or if you, as an entrepreneur, would like the chance to pitch us and the live audience to get feedback, start building relationships, and get great exposure for your company. Thank you, Elfish. Do reach out to the Token team and or myself, and we'll do our best to find the right set for you. And a big thank you to the LA Token team and to Emmanuel for making VCTV possible every single day. And again, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time today to share your thoughts and insights on our subject of machine learning and data as well. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and you can find me everywhere along with our guests 24/7, 365 online at